What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to offer a very enthusiastic review for the Season 2 finale of The White Lotus. This is one of my favorite shows of the year, and if you have not seen the latest episode, go do so, because I will be going into all the shocking revelations and spoilers in this latest episode, an episode called Arrivederci. And before I go any further, I just want to give a massive high five to writer and director Mike White. With this show, Mike White's been doing what a lot of auteur directors used to do, like in the 70s and 90s, where he's telling stories with an incredibly specific voice, a unique style, a unique perspective. I just love his whole approach to this world. And one part of me is sad that he's not just a great writer-director making movies, but the media landscape has changed and the cultural landscape has changed. And while at the theater these days you can still see things like Avatar 2, sadly, it's increasingly rare to find stories like this at the cinema the way I would like it, but I'll take what I can get because this season kept me gloriously entertained from start to finish. And the good news is that HBO already renewed it for Season 3 a few weeks back, so more of it's coming our way. How long Mike White is able to sustain this level of quality, who knows, but I think I like this season more than the last. I mean, I get why Season 1 made such a splash. And I gave it a positive review last summer when it finished. But there's something about this one where you have this exotic locale and all this stunningly beautiful photography and just maybe, I wouldn't say a more adult sensibility, but it just had much more generous quantities of sex and comedy. And I miss seeing sex and comedy in movies. It used to be everywhere, and now it's in short supply. But holy shit, this season, I laughed and laughed and laughed. I got turned on. I was fascinated. It's just great. And it just continues to blow my mind each and every single Sunday how HBO can completely dominate one day of the week. I feel like there's so many different content creators these days, so many different platforms. And for whatever reason, Sunday night, HBO's just said, everybody back off. It's ours. And the pressure to sustain that momentum must be enormous. But somehow they keep finding cool writers, cool directors, and just making it happen. And I thought House of the Dragon was much more to my taste because I'm a big fantasy nerd. And it was easier to do weekly breakdowns of that because I know the source material and that sort of thing. But I was pretty much just as hooked on Season 2 of The White Lotus. And this is why HBO continues to be one of the most trusted brands in all of entertainment. I mean, A24, that's a very trusted brand. Neon, that's a very trusted brand. But goddamn, HBO, they're like the Rolls Royce. And the reason I say Rolls Royce is because so much of their audience is still just watching it on old-fashioned linear television, old-school cable TV. And it's hysterical to me that in spite of all the technological innovations that we've enjoyed over the last 10 years, the HBO can still crank out a show where you put 9 o'clock on Sunday night on your calendar where there's no place you'd rather be. So why did this season work so well? Obviously, Mike White is an incredibly talented storyteller, but goddamn, he had an incredible ensemble cast. No matter how well written your characters might be, if you don't have actors with the chops to pull it off, well then you're going to go nowhere with your story. And I feel like for a lot of these actors, these are like career highs where they're delivering some of the best performances of their career. Or in the case of other performers, they were actors that I'd never seen before, but I look forward to seeing them in many more shows and movies in the years to come. And as I was watching this show, what I kept thinking to myself is that it reminded me of reading like a really great book when you're on vacation, where the storytelling voice and the performances, it was just so consistent from start to finish. And I think it's time for the television industry at large to re-examine this idea of having writers' rooms on shows, because here's a perfect example. One writer, one director, one voice, and you get a fantastic show, whereas some other shows just feel watered down and diluted, where you have way too many hacks in the writer's room, all throwing their ideas in there, and you never quite know what you're going to get with any given episode. And some people can pull that off if you have a really powerful showrunner who knows how to rally all those forces and get them to all march in the same direction. But getting back to the book metaphor, I don't want to read a book written by 10 different authors, and I don't want to watch a show written by 10 different authors. Give me one, maybe 2 or 3 writers, and I'm good to go. And I can live with the death of cinema if I can look forward to more auteur filmmakers working in this medium. But let's get into some of the highlights from this episode and things that really stood out to me. Much like the Season 1 finale, this episode gave us generous helpings of death, disappointment, and a little bit of hope and optimism for the future. And I know some people are going to find that to be unsatisfying or feel like it's unresolved, but I don't feel like this show's trying to serve up some sugary, sweet, satisfying conclusion. If anything, he wants us to think about, or Mike White wants us to think about, the journey that all these characters have been on, how they've changed, how they've not changed. I mean, just jumping ahead to the very end, a perfect example of how they have not changed is when we see this incredible shot at the airport where there's a beautiful young girl walking through the airport, and we see 3 different generations of DeGrassos all pausing to turn their head and watch her go by. And I've just absolutely loved seeing F. Murray Abraham, living legend, Michael Imperioli back on HBO where he belongs, and young Adam DeMarco as Albie DeGrasso. They've just given us such an incredible family story, and while it's kind of sad to see a young, I guess, sucker getting taken advantage of by a beautiful young sex worker, but I feel like in the years to come, he'll look back at those 50,000 euros as money well spent, because A, he got some of the most sex-crazed nights that he will probably ever experience, but also he'll be more worldly and wiser moving forward and less prone to be taken advantage of. And who knows, maybe he and Portia will reconnect back in the States. And speaking of Portia, I thought Haley Lou Richardson absolutely nailed that character. She really sold that mounting feeling of like panic and dread and terror, knowing that something horrible is about to happen and that there was very little she could do to alter the outcome, because suddenly she finds herself at the mercy of, I mean, we don't want to use the word mafia, but organized crime figures who very clearly have organized a conspiracy against her, as well as her boss Tanya, played by the great Jennifer Coolidge. And while I thought that Jennifer Coolidge's character would keep coming back season after season after season, I couldn't believe just how dark and grim that storyline got. Obviously, season 1 ended with that really nasty knife wound to the belly, but I never in a million years thought that we would actually see like a legitimate organized crime story unfold to the degree that we did. And I know a lot of people had figured out where the story was going well in advance. I must confess that this show was always 1 or 2 steps ahead of me. I couldn't quite put all the pieces together that basically her husband Greg, when young, was going by the name of Steve, and that due to his relationship with Tom Hollander's character Quentin, that they would be orchestrating this mass conspiracy where she would be killed so that he can inherit her money, because in a divorce he would get nothing due to their prenup. And so for a show that was relatively light on plot, I have to admit I was pretty caught off guard by just how plot-driven this final episode eventually came to be. And hopefully moving forward, the show will not make fans of the show unnecessarily paranoid when traveling abroad if they happen to meet a bunch of wealthy eccentrics who like, doing cocaine and going to the opera and that sort of thing. I think on the whole, those people seemed like a hell of a lot of fun, minus the whole plot to kill her, etc. and so forth. But I have to say, I was blown away by Jennifer Coolidge going into full Travis Bickle mode. It was like the goddamn finale of Taxi Driver, where she just closes her eyes and starts blasting, takes out most of the bad guys, and yeah, it was a very satisfying scene. And as soon as she started trying to get over that railing down into the dinghy, I was like, you know what? You're looking a little tipsy. Maybe you ought to try and find a rope ladder. But anyway, at any rate, her story ends in sadness, but you can't appreciate kind of the beauty and the joy of the show without also embracing some of the more dark turns in the plot as well. But let's get into my 2 favorite characters of the show, Lucia and Mia, who I think had the best happy ending of all of them as we see them walking down the streets of Sicily, 50,000 euros richer. I mean, that just looks like an absolutely beautiful day. You just want to walk down the streets, soak up the sun, have a glass of beer. I mean, they are living the good life. And I'd never seen either of these actresses before, but Lucia was played by Simona Tabasco and Mia was played by Beatrice Grano. And obviously they were very easy on the eyes, lovely young girls, but they were just fucking charming for days. They were just absolutely adorable. And watching them pursue their various, not agendas, but their various goals and how they went about it, they just made every single episode delightful. And there's something about Beatrice Grano's smile which is so knowing and so mischievous. It's almost, you feel like she could talk anybody into anything. And the way that she promises to Valentina that she's going to take her out to some clubs and introduce her to some of her girlfriends and that sort of thing. She was kind of like the dark horse candidate for like the MVP of the show. And we know that no matter what life might hold for the character of Valentina moving forward, it's going to be a lot more fun as a result. And I almost feel like this show could have been like renamed like the walk of shame because it features so many great episodes of people waking up in bed with somebody, having a panic attack, and making a mad dash out of there. And actress Sabrina Impacciatore, if I'm saying that correctly, she really sold that panic attack when she wakes up and there's a housekeeper coming in and she's like, doesn't anybody ever knock, blah, 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 blah. She has no undies on and she's rapidly trying to get herself together so she can get to her workstation. I mean, I was just howling and screaming. But as far as the various walks of shame that were featured throughout the season are concerned, I much prefer the expression, the stride of pride. And I hope that deep down the character of Valentina very much enjoyed her stride of pride, no matter what embarrassment she might have been feeling. But what I really appreciated about the characters of Lucia and Mia, it was just a massive turn on watching this show. That scene where they come to Michael Imperioli's bedroom, I think in episode 3, to thank him for the bikini he bought and how it ends with them in the hot tub and that sort of thing, that was super hot. Or the night where they're partying with Cameron and Ethan, and they use that line, let's fun, and Cameron's like, let's fun. I think that was episode 4 maybe. I'm going to be using that expression ad nauseum moving forward. It sums things up so perfectly, no matter what the plan is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever. Let's fun. It's kind of the perfect umbrella for a night of mischief. But getting back to the characters of Cameron, Daphne, Ethan, and Harper, their storyline absolutely kept me riveted the entire season. And I have a question for everybody out there. During that kind of mysterious, ambiguous scene between Daphne and Ethan when they go walking off to that little castle out in the water, I suspect that they both got a little bit of payback and a little bit of revenge, which is what's going to allow them both to kind of move forward in their relationships, feeling like things were balanced out. I'll have to go back and revisit the episode, but it just seems like whether Cameron's aware of it or not, Daphne has figured out the perfect way to kind of live with the fact that her husband is constantly committing all sorts of infidelities, because while he's flawed and a bit of a douchebag and dishonest, for whatever reason, their relationship works, and she has found a way in her own head to kind of live with it moving forward. I mean, as she alluded to in a previous episode, she has that trainer she likes to get it on with on a regular basis. And early in this episode, there was a really eerie little moment where she's on the phone with her kids and Cameron's in the bathroom and he's flossing and she's calling for him and he's looking at himself in the mirror like such a psychopath. And I feel like in that moment, we really see the real Cameron, where he is totally self-absorbed, and maybe every time he's interacting with the outside world, it's always a front of some kind. But he was absolutely fascinating, and I feel like a well-written villain is always going to be a show stealer in a lot of ways. Like Ethan, while he's very earnest and well-intentioned, and he wakes up early and goes running, and he believes in telling the truth and that sort of thing, he's not as interesting a character. I mean, he might be very fit and have a great-looking haircut and that sort of thing, and his rage is very justifiable. But I feel like when people think back on this show years from now, they're probably going to think about Cameron and Daphne before any other characters. And the scene that I absolutely found to be hysterical is when Cameron and Daphne show up for dinner and they see Harper and Ethan, and they're like, hey, like, how come you haven't been answering our texts? And they go over and join them for dinner. And Aubrey Plaza is sitting there with a tear running down her eye. And Cameron, he starts making toasts of friendship. And so, I mean, he's so superficial and so fake, but I think that's just the way he's able to get through life. And suddenly they're all having a good time. And then flash forward to the end of the evening, Ethan and Harper, they finally managed to overcome whatever sexual hangups have been preventing them from getting it on in the past. And an optimist will say that Ethan finally realized just how much he really loves his wife. But I feel like the real cynics, the pessimists, are going to say that because he was able to work his jealousy out of his system, both by hitting Cameron and basically trying to drown him, but also perhaps, as I said earlier in my theory, perhaps he hooked up with Daphne early on. And so he's now able to realize just how much he really wants to be with his wife. But the battle of the sexes, all the relationship dynamics between both those couples this season, that was a real showstopper and a real reason to keep watching this show. So who else have I not mentioned from this amazing cast? Leo Woodall, who played Jack, admittedly somebody with a lot of moral shortcomings and ethical flaws, but I felt like he had a little bit of a redemption in this episode, where he basically dropped off Portia by the airport and said, look, don't fuck with these people, go home, throws her phone. So not necessarily a good guy, but a little bit of nuance and a little bit of ambiguity goes a very long way. And I feel like this is that's where this show really thrives, in those moral gray areas. And there's so many films and shows out there these days which are very binary and have plots that allow the audience to make very quick moral judgments. But this show is very elusive on that front. I think that's why it's so mysterious and so provocative and so exciting, and why you keep wanting to watch more, because in a lot of ways I almost feel like it's got a seductive side where it's kind of luring the viewer into experiencing certain emotions or certain desires that they might not feel otherwise. It's a very subtle style of storytelling that I just really respond to. So Mike White, holy shit, he is a talented writer and director, and I hope that HBO just keeps rolling out the red carpet for him and allowing him to make shows as long as he has a mind to do so. And I love how Mike White stirs together a little bit of like artistic and intellectual pretension with a lot of just good old-fashioned fun. Like, there's a great moment earlier in the season when Aubrey Plaza is being stared at by all these Italian men, and it's this very direct and obvious homage for film history nerds to the scene with Monica Vitti in Michelangelo Antonioni's La Ventura, a film which I used to own in DVD, but somehow I misplaced it. At any rate, Criterion's got it out there. Definitely hunt it down. But that's a really deep cut, unless you're just a diehard like art house, European art house film nerd where you really love films from the 50s and 60s. But it's not like he just wallows in that intellectual pretension. He also just has good old-fashioned fun. Like, there's that moment earlier in the episode of the finale where F. Murray Abraham's character admits that when he's hugged by Mia, he got partially aroused, and I just started howling with laughter. So a nice mix of highbrow and lowbrow always goes a very long way with me. At any rate, as you can gather, I really enjoyed the show, and I'll definitely be recommending it to folks moving forward. I think alongside the final season of Better Call Saul and the first season of House of the Dragon, these might be my 3 favorite shows of 2022, but I need to look back over the entire year and to see what I watched and what are the real standouts. But there's no denying The White Lotus was a real highlight of 2022. But before I go, I need to bring you a word from Manscaped, the official sponsor of my podcast, Wrong Reel. It's never too early to play holiday music, and it's never too early to start thinking about gifts. Whether it's for a friend or the friends in your pants, you can make this a season to be jolly with Manscaped. Do your little drummer boy a favor and use the Lawnmower 4.0 to avoid another silent night in the bedroom, then add in Manscaped's top-of-the-line shower products to have the people thinking, all I want for Christmas is you. Santa cares about a sack, and so should you. Look nice when you get naughty by going to manscaped.com and using the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps for free shipping and 20% off. Inside, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, which are some of the most comfortable boxers I've ever worn, and a travel bag to hold your goodies. Think of it as the perfect package for your package. So yeah, if you enjoy this channel or you enjoy my podcast, Wrong Reel, that is the best way to show a little support for my various commentary endeavors. But it's time to sign off. So if you enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and if you want to talk more, hunt me down on Twitter @GeekinOut. But I can't thank you enough for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.